I never thought stopping for a stranger on the coldest night of the year would cost me everything I thought I knew about myself. But that's the thing about life-changing moments. You don't recognize them until you're already standing in the wreckage of your old life, staring at the person you're about to become. My name is Jake, and I was 17 when I met the man who would save me by destroying everything. December 17th, 11:47 p.m., 14 degrees. I remember because I kept checking my phone, watching the temperature drop, wondering if I'd make it home before my fingers went numb. I just finished a double shift at Mel's Diner, 6 hours of grease burns and fake smiles for tips that wouldn't cover half our rent. My second job. Mom left when I was 12. Dad stopped being a father about 6 months after that. Somewhere between the layoff and the bottom of his third bottle each night, I became the parent, the provider, the one who kept the lights on. I was so tired that night, tired of carrying weight that wasn't mine, tired of being angry at ghosts, a mother who vanished and the father who checked out while still breathing, tired of being 17 going on 40. That's when I saw him. An old man, collapsed against the brick wall of Monroe Pharmacy, his body curled against the wind like he was trying to disappear into the building itself. His coat was too thin, his hands shook, and there was something about the way he was folded there, not like he'd fallen, but like he'd been placed, like the universe had put him exactly in my path. I stopped walking. Here's what nobody tells you about kindness. It's not always a choice. Sometimes it's a compulsion, a weakness you can't control. I had every reason to keep going. I was freezing, exhausted, and I'd learned the hard way that the world doesn't reward good intentions. But my grandfather's face flashed in my mind. The way he looked in hospice those last weeks, so small and forgotten. I couldn't walk away. "Sir?" I crouched beside him, and when his eyes opened, something happened that I still can't explain. He looked at me, really looked, like he could see through my skin to whatever was underneath, and smiled. Not grateful, not relieved, knowing. Like he'd been waiting for me specifically. "There you are," he whispered, and I swear those two words changed the temperature of the air between us. I should have asked what he meant. I should have felt afraid. Instead, I helped him to his feet, walked him 6 blocks to St. Mary's Shelter, and bought him soup and coffee with money I'd earmarked for our electric bill. We talked for 3 hours. He told me his name was William Harrison, called himself a retired businessman. He had kind eyes, and this way of asking questions that made you feel like your answers actually mattered. Before I left, he pressed a business card into my hand. Worn, expensive paper with just a phone number. "Call me tomorrow, Jake," he said. "I think you and I have things to discuss." I never told him my name. Over the next 6 months, William Harrison became the father I'd needed my entire life. We met twice a week, coffee shops, park benches, once at a boxing gym where he taught me to fight with strategy, not anger. He shared lessons my dad forgot to teach me. Integrity, legacy, the difference between being wealthy and being rich. He talked about his company, his mistakes, his regrets, about children who'd value his money more than his humanity. But he never explained how he knew my name that first night. Never told me why, out of everyone who'd walked past him, he'd been waiting for me. I didn't learn the truth until it was too late. June 3rd, 9:15 a.m. The law office of Chen and Associates. That's when I discovered that the man I'd been having coffee with wasn't just William Harrison. He was Harrison Montgomery, the Harrison Montgomery, founder of Montgomery Industries, real estate, technology, manufacturing, a billion-dollar empire. And he was dead. Heart attack in his sleep. Peaceful, they said, 3 days earlier. The lawyer slid papers across the mahogany desk, and I remember staring at my name, Jacob Marcus Thornton, typed again and again across documents I didn't understand. "Mr. Montgomery's will is unusual," the lawyer said carefully. "He's left his entire estate to you, all assets, all holdings, all shares of Montgomery Industries. Estimated value, $3.2 billion. The room started spinning. There must be a mistake. I'm 17. I'm nobody. "He left you a letter. The lawyer handed me an envelope, expensive paper, William's careful handwriting. Jake, by the time you read this, you'll be angry. You'll feel betrayed, but you'll also be ready. I chose you because you chose kindness when it cost you something. My children chose greed. The difference matters. Build something worthy. Make me proud. W. That's when I heard shouting in the lobby, screaming. Harrison Montgomery's 3 children had arrived, 2 sons, 1 daughter, all in their 40s, all demanding to see the will, all convinced there'd been a mistake. There hadn't been. What came next? A war I never trained for. Lawsuits, threats, my dad suddenly remembering he had a son, and opinions about how his money should be spent. Journalists camped outside our apartment. Montgomery's children hiring investigators to prove I'd manipulated their father. Death threats in my locker at school. But the hardest part wasn't the chaos. It was the question that haunted me every night. Why me? What did William see in that angry, exhausted 17-year-old kid that made him believe I could handle an empire? What test had I passed without knowing I was taking it? And if I failed, if I proved him wrong, would I become just another person who disappointed someone who believed in me? This is the story of how one act of kindness on a frozen December night gave me everything and forced me to decide what kind of man I'd become when the world was watching. It's about inheritance and betrayal, found family and blood family, and the crushing weight of knowing someone saw your potential before you did. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever wondered whether doing the right thing actually matters, if you've ever been given a chance you didn't think you deserved, this story is for you. Hit that like button if you believe kindness is its own kind of power. Drop a comment about a moment when someone's faith in you changed your trajectory. And subscribe, because this is only the beginning. Trust me, you haven't seen the twist that breaks everything wide open. Some people inherit money. I inherited a war, a mystery, and a truth I wasn't ready to face. William Harrison didn't save me that December night. He'd been testing me, and I still don't know if I passed. The thing about destiny is that it doesn't announce itself with trumpets or lightning. It shows up on a Tuesday night when you're too tired to think straight, wearing the face of a stranger you can't ignore. December 17th changed my life, but not in the way people assume when they hear about the billions. Money was the smallest part of what I inherited. I was 17 and already ancient. That's what poverty and abandonment do. They age you from the inside out, turning your bones brittle with responsibility before you finished growing into them. My mother left when I was 12, and my father followed soon after, though his body stayed behind to haunt our apartment. He'd become a ghost made of whiskey and silence, and I'd become the man of the house by default, working doubles at Mel's Diner while my classmates worried about prom dates and college applications. That night, the temperature had dropped to 14 degrees. I remember checking my phone obsessively, watching the numbers fall, feeling the cold penetrate my secondhand jacket. My fingers were numb, my feet ached. I had $17 in tips folded in my pocket and a gas bill at home that needed $40. The math of survival consumed me constantly, a running tally of what we owed versus what I could earn. Then I saw him, Mr. Harrison, though I didn't know his name yet. He was collapsed against Monroe Pharmacy's brick wall like a discarded piece of furniture, his thin coat absolutely inadequate against the brutal wind. I should have walked past. I'd been trained by 3 years of adult responsibility to prioritize my own survival. But something in the way he was folded there, so carefully broken, reminded me of my grandfather in hospice, the way dignity leaves a person in increments until they're just flesh waiting for permission to stop. I stopped walking. My practical brain screamed at me to keep going. My body ignored it. "Sir?" I crouched beside him, and when his eyes opened, everything shifted. Not dramatically, no orchestra swelled, no divine light descended, but his eyes met mine with absolute clarity, and he smiled. Not grateful, not relieved, knowing, like he'd placed an order 6 months ago and I'd just been delivered. "There you are," he whispered, and those 3 words contained something I couldn't name: recognition, satisfaction, relief. as if he'd been waiting specifically for me, not just for anyone, but for Jake Thornton, 17-year-old nobody with frozen fingers and a dying father at home. I didn't ask what he meant. Maybe I was afraid of the answer. Instead, I helped him to his feet. He was surprisingly light, bird bones beneath his inadequate coat, and we walked 6 blocks to St. Mary's shelter. He moved slowly but with purpose, like a man conserving energy for something important. We didn't talk much during that walk, but I felt him watching me, evaluating me, though I couldn't imagine what he saw worth studying. At the shelter, I bought him soup and coffee with money earmarked for our electric bill. We sat in orange plastic chairs while steam rose from his cup, and he asked me questions. Not the usual questions homeless people ask, not "can you spare more" or "where's the nearest bathroom?" He asked about my life, my dreams, what I believed about people, whether I thought kindness was weakness or strength. William Harrison became my Tuesday and Thursday ritual. He never explained how he got my number, I'd never given it to him. But 3 days after our first meeting, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. His voice was warm, cultured, absolutely certain I'd answer. "Coffee on Thursday, Jake? There's a place on Morrison Street that makes exceptional Americanos." I went. Of course I went. Something about him pulled at me like gravity. Over the next 6 months, those meetings became the architecture of a new life I didn't know I was building. We'd sit in coffee shops or on park benches, and he'd teach me things my father had forgotten to pass down before alcohol dissolved his ability to parent. He taught me about integrity, not the shallow kind that's really just fear of getting caught, but the deep kind that's about who you are when nobody's watching. He told me stories about his early business days, mistakes he'd made, people he'd trusted who'd betrayed him. "The hardest lesson," he once said, stirring his coffee with methodical precision, is that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Sometimes family is the first to sell you out. I didn't know he was speaking from fresh wounds, didn't know his own children had tried to have him declared incompetent, had attempted to seize control of his company while he was still grieving. He never mentioned Montgomery Industries, never hinted at the empire he'd built. To me, he was just William, a retired businessman with kind eyes and an encyclopedic knowledge of human nature. He taught me to box at a gym in South Boston. Not street fighting, strategic combat. "Anger makes you sloppy," he'd say, watching me work the heavy bag. "Channel it, transform it, make it fuel instead of fire." I'd been carrying rage for 5 years by then, fury at my mother for leaving, at my father for checking out, at myself for not being enough to make either of them stay. William taught me to reshape that anger into something useful. But the strangest part was how he knew things he shouldn't. Once, I showed up stressed about a calculus exam I'd mentioned to no one. He brought a book, Advanced Mathematics, way beyond high school level. "You're smarter than your circumstances, Jake. Don't let poverty define your ceiling." Another time, I'd had a brutal fight with my father the night before, and William immediately asked, "How's your dad?" before I'd said a word. My face must have shown my confusion because he just smiled. "You carry your home life in your shoulders. They're up around your ears today." April brought warmth and a strange conversation. We were sitting by the Charles River watching boats cut through water that reflected a rare blue sky. "Tell me about loyalty," William said suddenly. "If someone gave you power you didn't earn, didn't deserve, what would you do with it?" "Probably screw it up," I said honestly. "I can barely handle my own life." "That's not what I asked." His voice was gentle but insistent. "Would you use it selfishly? Would you help others? Would you try to deserve it retroactively? Or would you reject it as too much responsibility?" I thought about my father, about how one layoff had destroyed him because he'd built his entire identity on being a provider. When that was taken away, he had nothing left to be. "I'd try to become worthy of it," I finally said, "even if I failed, especially if I failed. Because the trying matters more than the success, doesn't it?" William smiled then, really smiled, not the polite social version, but something deeper. "Yes," he said quietly, "the trying matters most." May brought my 18th birthday and a gift I didn't understand. William handed me a leather journal, expensive and worn. "Write down what you learn," he said, "not about business or money, about people, about yourself. The most valuable education is self-knowledge, and you can't achieve it without documentation." I thought it was a strange gift, but started writing anyway. Mostly I wrote about anger, how it was changing shape inside me, becoming less like a fire and more like a tool I could pick up or set down. I wrote about my father, about coming home to find him passed out on the couch again, about the strange grief of losing someone who was still alive. I wrote about my mother, about how I'd stopped hating her and started pitying her, which somehow felt worse. William read some of my entries. I don't know how, I never showed him, but one Thursday he quoted something I'd written verbatim. Sometimes I think my mother didn't leave because she didn't love us. She left because she loved herself more, and maybe that's not actually a crime. He looked at me with something like pride. You're learning to see complexity. That's rare at 18. How did you? I started, but he just smiled and changed the subject. The strange moments accumulated like evidence of something I couldn't quite name. He always knew when I was struggling financially, would casually suggest we meet at restaurants where he'd insist on ordering extra food that would just go to waste. He knew when I'd fought with my father, when I'd had a bad shift at the diner, when I was worried about bills. It should have felt intrusive, but instead it felt like being seen for the first time in my life. Then came the afternoon that changed everything, though I didn't know it then. We were at the boxing gym and William was moving slower than usual, his breath labored. I wanted to stop, to call someone, but he waved me off. I'm old, Jake. This is what old looks like. But there was something in his eyes, not fear exactly, but urgency, like he was running out of time and knew it. I need to tell you something, he said, lowering himself onto the gym bench with careful precision, about why I sought you out. My stomach dropped. Sought me out? That night in December wasn't chance. I was there because I needed to know something about you, whether you'd help someone who couldn't repay you, whether you'd sacrifice your own comfort for a stranger. He paused, breathing hard. You passed, Jake. You chose kindness when it cost you something real. I felt sick. You tested me? You manipulated? I gave you a choice, he interrupted, his voice firm despite his breathlessness. Every person who walked past me that night made a choice. 27 people saw me before you stopped. You were the only one who chose to see a human being instead of a problem. Why? The word came out strangled. Why does it matter? He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Fear. Not of death, but of having chosen wrong. Because I'm dying, Jake, and I need to know my life's work will go to someone who deserves it. Not someone who's entitled to it, someone who's earned it through character. I wanted to ask what he meant, but his phone rang, a sharp, expensive sound. He answered, listened, then stood with sudden urgency. I have to go. We'll talk Thursday. He gripped my shoulder, and for a second I thought he might say something momentous. Instead, he just repeated, Thursday. He died on Wednesday. Has anyone ever tested you without your knowledge? And when you learned the truth, did it change how you saw your own choices? Or did it make you question whether your goodness was ever really yours? June 3rd, 9:15 a.m. Chen & Associates Law Office, 14th floor, windows overlooking downtown Boston. I remember every detail because my brain, in its panic, recorded everything with brutal clarity. The mahogany desk, the leather chairs, the way sunlight slanted through Venetian blinds creating prison bar shadows across expensive carpet. The lawyer, Helen Chen, was professional and careful in the way people are when delivering news that will detonate your life. Mr. Thornton, thank you for coming on such short notice. I'm handling the estate of William Harrison Montgomery. She paused, watching for recognition. My face must have shown confusion because she added gently, You knew him as William Harrison. My throat closed. He's dead? 3 days ago. Heart attack. Very peaceful. She slid papers across the desk. Expensive stationery, heavy paper, words I couldn't process. His will is unusual. Mr. Montgomery has named you as the sole beneficiary of his entire estate. The room tilted. That's impossible. I barely knew him. We had coffee. He was just... Harrison Montgomery, she interrupted, was the founder and CEO of Montgomery Industries. Real estate, technology, manufacturing, Estimated net worth $3.2 billion. He's left all of it to you. The business, the properties, the investment portfolios, everything. I couldn't breathe. The numbers were too large to comprehend, abstract as astronomy. 3.2 billion. I made $8 an hour, plus tips. I wore shoes with holes in them. This couldn't be real. Helen produced an envelope. He left you this. My name in William's careful handwriting, each letter formed with deliberate precision. My hands shook as I opened it. Jake, by the time you read this, you'll be angry. You'll feel betrayed, manipulated, used. You'll want to reject everything because accepting it means accepting that our friendship had purpose beyond itself. I'm sorry for that, but I'm not sorry for choosing you. I built Montgomery Industries from nothing. I made it ruthless and profitable and powerful, and in the process, I raised children who valued money over humanity. When I tried to course correct, to teach them integrity, they tried to have me declared incompetent. They wanted to seize the company while I was still breathing. My own blood saw me as an obstacle to their inheritance. I needed to find someone who understood the difference between deserving and entitled. Someone who chose right action when it cost them something real. You passed every test, Jake, often without knowing you were being tested. That December night was orchestrated. I was never in danger. My driver was parked around the corner. But your choice was real. You sacrificed money you needed for electricity to buy soup for a stranger. That told me everything. The question isn't whether you deserve this. The question is what you'll become now that you have it. Will power corrupt you? Will wealth change who you are? I believe you'll resist that corruption. I believe you'll build something worthy. Make me proud. Prove I chose correctly. Build the version of Montgomery Industries I should have built, one that values people over profit. And Jake, thank you for seeing an old man on a cold night. Thank you for choosing kindness. You saved me that night in ways you didn't understand. You reminded me that goodness still exists. William. I read it 3 times, each word cutting deeper. He'd manipulated everything. Our friendship, our conversations, every meaningful moment we'd shared. All of it orchestrated to evaluate me like a science experiment. The betrayal felt physical, a knife between my ribs. But underneath the betrayal was something worse, understanding. He'd given me what my father never could, attention, guidance, purpose. And he'd done it knowing he was dying, knowing every conversation was borrowed time. He'd invested his final months in me instead of his own children. Why? What had he seen that I couldn't see in myself? The shouting started before I could ask. Voices in the lobby, escalating from angry to enraged. Helen's expression shifted to alarm as the door burst open. 3 people stormed in. 2 men in expensive suits, 1 woman in designer everything. Middle-aged, entitled, fury radiating off them like heat. "Where is he?" the older man demanded. "Where's the kid?" I stood, instinct overriding shock. These were William's children. I saw it in their faces, his bone structure, his eyes, but emptied of warmth. Everything beautiful about William's features had curdled into cruelty in them. "You manipulated him," the woman snarled, pointing at me like evidence of a crime. A 17-year-old homeless charity case who seduced an old man out of his fortune will destroy you in court. "I didn't," I started, but Helen cut in, her voice sharp with professional authority. "Mr. Montgomery's will is ironclad and witnessed by 3 independent parties. Your father was evaluated by 2 psychiatrists who declared him of sound mind. You have no legal standing." "Legal standing?" The younger man laughed, bitter and mean. "We're his children, his blood, and you're nobody." He looked at me with contempt that felt like acid. "You think you can just step into his life and take what's ours? We'll bury you." They left threats hanging in the air like smoke, lawsuits, investigations, public destruction. After they stormed out, I sat in that leather chair and tried to reconcile 2 truths. William had used me, and William had saved me. Both could be true simultaneously. Both were true. The media found me within 48 hours. Apparently, a 17-year-old inheriting a billion-dollar empire is news. They camped outside our apartment. Cameras, reporters, vans with satellite dishes. I couldn't go to school, couldn't go to work, couldn't exist without someone documenting my every movement. They called me Mystery Teen, Harrison's secret heir, and my personal favorite, Cinderella Boy. The contempt was barely hidden. My father, predictably, woke up. 4 years of functional alcoholism lifted like fog the second money entered the picture. Suddenly, he had opinions about my future, about family obligations, about how we should invest wisely. He used "we" constantly, as if my inheritance was communal property. As if he hadn't abdicated fatherhood years ago when being a dad became inconvenient. "This is our chance," he said, sober for the first time in months, his eyes bright with something I'd mistaken for hope until I recognized it as greed. "We can pay off the house, buy a bigger place, finally live right." "It's not ours," I said quietly, "it's mine," and William left instructions. His face hardened. "I'm your father. I have a say." "You stopped being my father when I was 12 years old," I interrupted, and the words tasted like freedom and grief simultaneously. "You let me carry everything while you drowned yourself. I don't owe you a resurrection." He hit me. Not hard, he was too weak from years of alcohol abuse for real force, but hard enough. The shock was worse than the pain. And standing there with my cheek burning, I realized William had prepared me for this too. "The people closest to you will reveal themselves when stakes get high," he'd said once. "Money is truth serum. It shows you who people really are." The lawsuit started immediately. Montgomery's children filed 3 separate legal challenges, contesting the will, claiming undue influence, accusing me of elder abuse. They leaked stories to tabloids: Jake the gold digger, Jake the manipulator, Jake who preyed on a lonely old man. None of it was true, but truth doesn't matter when you're fighting billionaires with unlimited legal resources and no shame. My phone became a weapon of harassment. Death threats mixed with blackmail attempts, interview requests mixed with accusations. I changed my number twice before realizing it didn't matter. They'd always find me. Montgomery's children hired investigators to dig through my life, searching for leverage. They found my father's DUIs, my mother's abandonment, my poverty. They found everything that made me vulnerable and weaponized it. "Poor kid from broken home seduces dying billionaire," the headlines read. "Teenage con artist or deserving heir?" They posted pictures of me at 13, skinny, haunted, obvious poverty written in my too small clothes and hollow eyes. They meant it as evidence of manipulation. Instead, it just showed what William had seen: a kid drowning who'd somehow kept his capacity for kindness. Helen Chen became my lifeline. She was brilliant, ruthless, and utterly unimpressed by Montgomery money. "They're trying to exhaust you," she explained during one of our daily calls. "They think if they make your life hellish enough, you'll surrender the inheritance just to make it stop. We need to prove you deserved this, that William chose wisely." But how do you prove you deserve $3 billion? What test could possibly justify that kind of faith? The answer came from an unexpected source: William himself. He'd left instructions, specific, detailed plans for how I should spend my first year as Montgomery's heir. Not on yachts or mansions or private jets, but on learning. He'd enrolled me in business courses, arranged mentorships with leaders he trusted, created a roadmap for becoming worthy of what I'd been given. "He knew they'd come for you," Helen said, showing me documents. "He prepared for this. Every lesson, every conversation you had with him was documented. He kept journals proving this relationship was real, meaningful, transformative. He built you a defense before you knew you'd need one." Even dead, William was still teaching me, still protecting me, still believing I could become something more than my circumstances suggested. The thought made me want to cry and fight simultaneously. That night, I stood in our crappy apartment, roaches, water stains, the smell of my father's stale beer, and made a decision. I could surrender, give the Montgomery children what they claimed they deserved, go back to being nobody. It would be easier, safer. I'd lose everything, but at least the war would end. Or I could fight. Not for the money, I still couldn't conceptualize that amount, but for William, for his faith in me, for the months he'd invested when he could have spent his final days in comfort, for the father he'd been when my biological father had failed. I chose war. When everything you thought was genuine turns out to be strategic, does that make it less real? Can love and manipulation coexist? And if someone tests you in order to save you, are you obligated to live up to their vision of who you could become? The first board meeting was scheduled for July 15th. I had 6 weeks to learn an entire industry, to understand the empire William had built, to somehow transform from teenage diner employee to credible heir of Montgomery Industries. Helen arranged for me to meet with Marcus Webb, Montgomery's COO and William's most trusted executive. If anyone could teach me to survive, it was him. Marcus was 63, black, impeccably dressed, and possessed the kind of authority that made rooms quiet when he entered. He'd been with William for 30 years, had helped build Montgomery Industries from regional real estate company to global conglomerate. He looked at me with careful assessment, not hostile, but not convinced either. I was a puzzle he needed to solve before deciding whether to support or sabotage. "Tell me what you know about William," he said without preamble. We were in his office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. I felt absurdly out of place in my thrift store blazer. "He taught me to box," I said. "Told me anger makes you sloppy. He bought me coffee every Tuesday and Thursday. Talked about integrity like it was currency. Never mentioned having billions of dollars." Marcus smiled, something thawing in his expression. "That sounds like William. He believed character mattered more than capital." He leaned back, studying me. His children disagreed. They thought money was the only thing that mattered. That's why he cut them out. Did he talk about me? The question escaped before I could stop it. Vulnerability laid bare. Before he died, did he tell you about choosing me? "Every day for 6 months," Marcus said quietly. He'd call me after your meetings, excited as I'd heard him in years. "Marcus," he'd say, "I found him. I found someone who sees people." He was terrified he'd die before finishing your education, before you were ready. The grief hit unexpectedly, sharp and total. William had talked about me, had cared, had worried. The betrayal I'd been carrying shifted shape, became something more complicated. Yes, he'd orchestrated our meeting, but what grew between us, that had been real. Marcus spent 6 weeks teaching me everything: corporate structure, board politics, financial statements, hostile takeover defense. He showed me where Montgomery Industries succeeded and where it failed ethically. "William built something powerful," Marcus explained, "but he built it ruthlessly. He always regretted that. He wanted you to transform it into something better." No pressure. The education was brutal. 14-hour days studying business law, finance, strategic planning. I had tutors for economics, corporate governance, public speaking. Marcus drilled me on every aspect of Montgomery Industries until I dreamed in revenue projections and market analyses. My brain ached constantly. I'd gone from barely graduating high school to attempting business school condensed into 6 weeks. But Marcus taught me more than business. He taught me about William, the man behind the myth, how he'd grown up poor in South Boston, built his first property at 23 through sheer determination and ruthless negotiation, how he'd married young, had 3 children who'd grown up surrounded by wealth and learned to value nothing else, how his wife had died 12 years ago and he'd slowly realized his children were strangers wearing his DNA. "They tried to take the company from him," Marcus said one evening, exhaustion making him more candid than usual. Claimed he was mentally incompetent, that his judgment was compromised. They wanted Montgomery Industries carved up and sold, billions divided 3 ways. William fought them, won, then cut them out completely. He told me, "I'd rather give everything to a stranger who has character than to blood relatives who have none." "So he went looking for someone," I said slowly, pieces clicking into place. "Someone who'd prove character matters more than bloodline." "He went looking for you," Marcus corrected, "specifically you. He had investigators watching you for 3 months before that December night. He knew your story, your mother's abandonment, your father's breakdown, how you'd kept working and caring despite having every excuse to become bitter. He knew you were the one. I felt sick. He investigated me for 3 months? He needed to be sure. The stakes were too high to trust chance. Marcus met my eyes, unflinching. You're angry. You have a right to be. But consider this. William spent 3 months verifying you were who you appeared to be. His children spent 3 minutes trying to have him declared insane. Which kind of diligence would you prefer? The logic was sound, but the violation remained. Every private moment of my life, observed, documented, evaluated. William had known my worst moments, my failures, my poverty, my pain. He'd studied me like a specimen before deciding I was worth saving. Did I pass? I asked bitterly. Whatever test he set up, did I score high enough? You're here, aren't you? Marcus said gently. He bet his entire legacy on you, Jake. That's not passing a test. That's being chosen. The board meeting approached like a storm on the horizon. I was as ready as 6 weeks could make me, but 6 weeks couldn't bridge the gap between who I was and who I needed to be. Montgomery's children would be there. They still held advisory positions despite being written out of the will. They'd eviscerate me if given the chance. The night before the meeting, I called Marcus, panic rising. I can't do this. I'm 18 years old. I don't belong in that room. No, Marcus agreed. You don't. Not yet. But William believed you would someday. So here's what you do tomorrow. You walk in there and you tell the truth. Tell them you're unqualified, unprepared, and scared. Tell them William chose you anyway. Tell them you're going to learn, fail, and try again. Honesty is the only weapon they won't expect. And if that's not enough, then William chose wrong, Marcus said simply, but I don't think he did. The boardroom was designed to intimidate. 26th floor, walls of windows, a table that could seat 30. 18 people waited when Marcus and I arrived. Executives, board members, lawyers, and seated at the far end like judges at an execution, William's 3 children. They watched me enter with expressions ranging from contempt to predatory interest. I was 18 years old in a borrowed suit, about to face people who'd spent decades building empires. My hands shook. Marcus beside me radiated calm authority, but I knew he couldn't save me. This was my trial. I had to survive it alone. Robert Montgomery, William's eldest son, 52, silver hair, his father's features sharpened into cruelty, spoke first. So this is the charity case? The boy who seduced billions out of my father? His voice dripped contempt. Tell us, Jake, what exactly are your qualifications for running a multinational corporation? Did you take business classes between your shifts at the diner? The room waited. I could retreat into defense, match his hostility, try to prove I belonged. Instead, I remembered Marcus's advice. Tell the truth. None, I said clearly. I have no qualifications. I barely graduated high school. 6 weeks ago, I didn't know what a board of directors was. I'm completely, objectively unqualified for this position. Silence. Robert's expression shifted from contempt to confusion. He'd expected fight, not surrender. But your father thought I could learn, I continued. He thought character mattered more than credentials. He spent his last 6 months teaching me, not about business, though he did that too, but about integrity, about seeing people as humans instead of assets. He told me Montgomery Industries was built through ruthless efficiency, and he regretted that. He wanted it transformed. Transformed? Robert laughed, bitter and sharp. My father built a $3 billion company through strength and strategic brilliance. You think you can waltz in and change his legacy? I think that's exactly what he wanted, I said quietly. He told me he raised children who valued money over humanity. He said his biggest failure wasn't in business, it was in parenting. He wanted someone who'd build the version of Montgomery Industries he wished he'd created from the beginning. Catherine Montgomery, William's daughter, 48, ice blonde and furious, leaned forward. You manipulated a dying old man. You played on his loneliness and guilt. That's not character, that's predatory behavior. Your father wasn't lonely when I met him, I said, heat entering my voice. He was deliberate, strategic. He spent 3 months investigating me before orchestrating that December night. He knew everything about my life, my mother's abandonment, my father's alcoholism, how I'd worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. He tested me repeatedly, evaluated my choices, documented everything. If anyone was being strategic, it was him. I pulled out the folder Marcus had prepared, copies of William's journals, his documentation of our relationship, psychiatric evaluations proving his sound mind. I slid them across the table. Your father left a paper trail proving every decision he made was calculated and intentional. He wasn't senile or manipulated. He was methodical. And he chose me because when he staged a test, collapsing on a street corner on the coldest night of the year, I stopped. 27 people walked past him. I was the only one who sacrificed something I needed to help a stranger. How noble, Thomas Montgomery, the youngest son at 45, sneered. You bought him soup? That's worth $3 billion? It was worth something to him, I said, and my voice cracked slightly. It was worth 6 months of his time, worth restructuring his entire estate, worth betting his legacy on an 18-year-old kid instead of the children he raised. You want to know why? Ask yourselves what you did during those same 6 months. Were you visiting him, learning from him, or were you in court trying to have him declared incompetent so you could seize his company? The room went silent. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Marcus had coached me on this. The Montgomery children's attempted coup was documented, ugly, public knowledge within corporate circles. I'm not here to replace your father, I continued, steadier now. I'm here to honor him, to learn what he wanted to teach me, to transform Montgomery Industries into something that values people as much as profit. Will I fail sometimes? Absolutely. I'm going to make mistakes that would horrify anyone with actual experience. But I'm going to try. And I hope, that's what he saw in me. Not capability, but willingness. Not expertise, but character. I looked directly at Robert, Catherine, and Thomas. Your father loved you. He told me about you, about how brilliant you were as children, how much potential you had. But he said you learned to see people as transactions, as obstacles or opportunities. He wanted to leave his legacy to someone who still saw humans as humans. That's not manipulation. That's grief. It's a father's last desperate attempt to create something good from his life's work. Catherine's face twisted with something, pain, rage, recognition, I couldn't tell. For a moment, I thought she might cry. Then the moment passed and her expression hardened back to marble fury. The vote was called. Marcus had warned me, I needed majority board support to maintain control. If they sided with William's children, I'd be ousted, relegated to figurehead status while the company was carved up and sold. Everything William had worked for, destroyed. All in favor of confirming Jake Thornton as chairman and CEO of Montgomery Industries, subject to oversight board and annual performance review. Hands rose. Slowly at first, then more. Marcus's hand, then Martha Chen from legal, Samuel Rodriguez from operations. One by one, 12 hands rose out of 18, majority. Robert stood abruptly, his chair scraping against floor. This isn't over. We'll take this to court. We'll prove undue influence, coercion, manipulation. We'll destroy you and everything our father built out of spite. Then you'll prove him right, I said quietly. He said blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. That family can betray you worse than strangers. Thank you for the demonstration. They left. The room exhaled. I felt like I'd been in a fistfight, exhausted, battered, somehow still standing. Marcus gripped my shoulder, approval in his eyes. You did well. William would be proud. But I couldn't feel pride, only the crushing weight of responsibility. The knowledge that I just inherited not a company, but a war, and the enemy was ruthless, experienced, and genetically programmed for corporate combat. That night, alone in the small apartment, I still couldn't bring myself to leave. I opened William's journal, the one he'd given me, and wrote, Day 1, survived. But survival isn't success. You bet everything on me being different, on character mattering. I hope you were right. I hope I don't prove that good intentions aren't enough in the real world. I hope your faith wasn't misplaced." Then I closed the journal and cried. For William, for the father I'd lost twice, for the impossible task ahead, and for the terrifying possibility that I might actually deserve this after all. Money changes everything. Not just circumstances, that's obvious, but the fundamental texture of reality. Suddenly, every interaction carries hidden weight. Every friendship is suspect. Every kindness might be manipulation. I'd been wealthy for 3 months, and already I understood why William had seemed so lonely. I moved out of my father's apartment, not into a mansion, despite everyone's expectations, but into a modest 2-bedroom condo in Cambridge. I couldn't stomach excess when I still remembered counting quarters for bus fare. My father didn't speak to me after I refused to buy him a house, after I offered only to pay for rehab instead. He called me ungrateful, accused me of abandoning family. The irony was lost on him. Marcus taught me to run Montgomery Industries, but he couldn't teach me to navigate the social warfare that came with it. Suddenly, I had friends I'd never met, distant relatives appearing with sob stories and investment opportunities, classmates who'd ignored me for years asking for loans. The diner where I'd worked offered me an honorary management position with no duties and substantial pay, essentially asking me to be a mascot for minimum wage workers I'd once been. I said no to everything. Maybe that made me heartless, but I'd learned from William, money reveals character. Anyone who wanted me now had rejected me when I was nobody. The equation was simple. But the loneliness was devastating. I couldn't date. How do you trust someone who might love you or might love your billions? I couldn't make friends. Everyone wanted something. Even good people, well-intentioned people, treated me differently now. Like I was made of glass and gold simultaneously, fragile and precious and fundamentally changed. The only person who treated me the same was Sarah. She'd worked at Mill's Diner, 2 years older than me, had been kind when kindness wasn't required. After the inheritance, she texted once, "Congrats on escaping. You deserved better than this place gave you." Nothing else. No requests, no sudden friendship, just acknowledgement. I called her. We had coffee at Mel's because I insisted, because I needed to prove to myself I hadn't become someone who forgot where he came from. She didn't ask about money, didn't treat me like a headline. We talked about her college classes, about the diner's new manager, about whether I missed the simple clarity of having nothing. "Do you?" she asked. "Miss it?" "Every day," I admitted. When I was poor, I knew exactly who I was. Now, I don't know if I'm me or just money wearing my face. She considered this seriously. "You know what I think? I think you're scared of becoming them, the Montgomery kids, rich people who forgot how to be human. But fear of becoming something is evidence you won't. Monsters don't worry about their own monstrosity." It was the most helpful thing anyone had said in months. Montgomery Industries required constant attention. I attended meetings I barely understood, made decisions that affected thousands of jobs, approved budgets larger than my hometown's GDP. Marcus guided me, but increasingly he expected me to lead. "You can't be William's shadow," he said. "You have to become your own version of leadership." But what kind of leader was I? William had been ruthless and strategic. His children had been greedy and cruel. I didn't want to be either, but kindness felt like weakness in boardrooms designed for combat. Every decision was a tightrope walk between ethics and pragmatism. The first real test came in September. Montgomery Industries owned a manufacturing plant in Michigan, profitable but with documented safety violations. Fixing the violations would cost $20 million and lower quarterly profits significantly. Ignoring them risked worker injuries but maintained shareholder value. The board expected me to ignore them. "These things resolve themselves," one executive said casually, meaning workers would eventually get hurt badly enough to force action anyway. I couldn't stomach it. I approved the safety upgrades. Profits dropped. Shareholders complained. Several board members expressed concerns about leadership priorities. Catherine Montgomery leaked to press. Boy CEO crashes stock price through naive idealism. Marcus found me that night staring at financial projections, second-guessing everything. "You did the right thing," he said. Did I? $20 million for what might never happen. Maybe I'm not ruthless enough for this. Maybe William chose wrong. William spent 30 years making profitable decisions that cost human dignity, Marcus said quietly. He told me once that success, measured purely in money, is just expensive failure. You're building what he wished he'd built. That matters more than quarterly reports. But quarterly reports paid salaries, supported families. If I destroyed Montgomery Industries through idealism, thousands would suffer from my righteousness. The ethical calculations were impossible, every choice a betrayal of someone. My father called that week, drunk and bitter. "You could have saved me," he slurred. "Could have given me a purpose, made me part of your success. Instead, you abandoned me like your mother did." Guess selfishness runs in the family. I hung up, then called him back. "Dad, I'll pay for rehab, anytime, anywhere, any program you want. But I won't fund your destruction. I watched you drink yourself into a ghost. I won't subsidize the process." He called me heartless and hung up. I sat in my modest condo, surrounded by expensive silence, and wondered if having everything meant losing what mattered most. William had tried to warn me. He'd built an empire and lost his family. I was following the same path, just faster. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Power is the loneliest thing I've ever experienced. You gave me everything, and in doing so, took away the simple human connections that made life bearable." Was this the test? Not whether I'd stay kind with billions, but whether I'd survive the isolation of being the only person in the room who still remembered being powerless? I'm not sure I'm strong enough for this. I'm not sure anyone is. The next morning, Sarah texted, "Coffee, my treat this time. And before you argue, I make $9 an hour plus tips and I can afford one coffee for a friend. Let me." I went. She bought me a $3 coffee. And somehow that cheap cup meant more than anything money could buy. It meant someone saw me, not my net worth. It meant connection still existed if I didn't destroy it by assuming everyone wanted something. October brought the kind of autumn Boston does best. Leaves turning fire-colored, air sharp enough to remind you winter is coming. I'd been CEO of Montgomery Industries for 4 months. In that time, I'd survived 3 hostile board meetings, 2 lawsuits from William's children, and approximately 400 moments of crippling self-doubt. Then Marcus called. "We need to talk, in person, tonight." His voice carried something I'd never heard before, uncertainty edged with fear. He came to my condo, carrying a box, worn cardboard, corner soft with age. I found this in William's private office, his personal effects from the last year of his life. There's something inside you need to see. Inside were journals, dozens of them, leather-bound, filled with William's precise handwriting. But these weren't business records. They were personal, intimate, and they were about me. September 12th. Watch Jake work his shift at Mel's today. 17 years old, exhausted but still smiled at every customer. Still treated people with dignity despite serving them for $8 an hour. This is what my children lack. Basic human decency independent of personal benefit. October 3rd. Had Jake investigated thoroughly. Mother abandoned family when he was 12. Father descended into alcoholism. Jake worked 2 jobs, maintained 3.2 GPA, never got in trouble despite having every excuse for delinquency. Remarkable resilience, remarkable character. But is character enough? Will it survive corruption of power? November 28th, Thanksgiving. Jake spent the holiday working double shift so coworker could see her kids. Declined my invitation to dinner. Doesn't know who I am yet. This is the 4th time I've documented him sacrificing personal comfort for strangers. This isn't performance. He doesn't know he's being watched. This is authentic. Page after page, 3 months of observations before that December night. William had watched me, documented me, studied me like a scientist observing a potentially extinct species. It should have felt invasive. It did feel invasive. But underneath the violation was something else. Absolute, unwavering attention. Someone had seen me when I thought I was invisible. Then I found the entry from December 17th, the night we met. Tonight, I placed myself on that corner and waited. 27 people passed. 27 chose convenience over compassion. Then, Jake. He stopped, argued with himself. I could see the internal battle, survival instinct versus moral compulsion. He chose to help despite personal cost. He chose humanity. This is who I need. This is who deserves what I've built. Not blood, not entitlement, character. But the next entry made my hands shake. December 18th. Jake called to check on me, unprompted. He could have forgotten me by now, chalked me up to one good deed and moved on. Instead, he called, asked how I was, whether I needed anything. He's not doing this for reward. He doesn't know I have anything to give. He's doing it because he's constitutionally incapable of abandoning people. He's everything my children aren't. I kept reading, months of entries documenting our Tuesday and Thursday meetings. But interspersed with observations about me were entries about William himself, his failing health, his fear of death, his desperate hope that his life would mean something beyond profit margins. March 15th. Told Jake about integrity today. He listened like it was scripture. My own children stopped listening 20 years ago. They heard make money and stopped processing anything else. I created them. This is my failure. Jake is my redemption attempt. April 22nd. Jake asked what I'd do differently if I could rebuild my life. I told him I'd prioritize people over profit. He said, "It's not too late." It is though. My legacy is built, but his isn't. Maybe I can't fix my mistakes, but I can prevent him from making them. May 30th. Heart acting up again. Cardiologist says months, not years. I'm running out of time. Jake isn't ready. He's brilliant and kind but fragile. Power will break him if he's not prepared. I need to accelerate his education, push harder, hope he's resilient enough to withstand what's coming. The guilt is crushing. I'm using him to ease my conscience about a life misspent. But what choice do I have? Leave everything to my children and watch them destroy it? Better to bet on a stranger with character than blood relatives with none. The final entry was dated June 2nd, the day before William died. Saw Jake today, told him about the testing. He was angry, hurt, betrayed. Good, he should be. What I've done is manipulative, strategic, potentially cruel, but it's also necessary. He needed to know the truth before inheriting the burden. I wanted him to choose this with eyes open, not stumble into it blind. I'm dying. Maybe tonight, maybe next week, but soon. My last conscious choice is trusting Jake Thornton with everything I've built. He'll suffer for this. The lawsuits, the media, the loneliness of power. I'm condemning him to all of it. But I believe he'll survive. I believe he'll transform Montgomery Industries into something worthy. And if I'm wrong, if he fails or breaks or becomes corrupted by wealth, then I've destroyed an innocent kid to ease my own guilt. That's the risk. That's the gamble. Jake, if you're reading this, you're probably furious. You have every right to be. I manipulated you, tested you, used you to redeem myself. I'm not a good man. I built an empire on ruthless ambition and sacrificed my family in the process. But you're good. You're what I should have been. Don't let power change that. Don't let money make you forget the kid who stopped on a frozen street to help a stranger. That kid is worth more than every dollar I ever made. I'm sorry for what I'm putting you through, and I'm grateful, so profoundly grateful that you exist. That kindness still exists in the world. You gave an old man hope in his final months. Thank you. Build something better. Be better than I was. That's all I ask. William. I finished reading and couldn't breathe. The entire relationship, every coffee, every boxing lesson, every conversation, all of it calculated, all of it strategic, but also all of it genuine. William had used me, yes, but he'd also loved me. Both truths existed simultaneously. Marcus watched me process this, his face grave. He knew what he was doing to you, the burden, the isolation, the impossible standards. He knew, and he did it anyway, because he believed you were strong enough. Was he right? I asked, voice cracking. Am I strong enough? You're still here, Marcus said simply. You haven't quit, haven't broken, haven't become what you hate. That's strength, Jake. That's what he bet on. I looked at the journals, at William's meticulous documentation of my entire transformation from nobody to heir. Evidence of manipulation, evidence of love, evidence that sometimes the two are inseparable. He saved me, I said quietly. Even while using me, he saved me. He gave me purpose, education, a future, and he did it knowing it might destroy me. That's parenthood, Marcus said. You push your kids toward greatness knowing they might fail, might get hurt, might hate you for forcing them to try. William never got to be a real father to his own children, so he tried with you. Imperfectly, manipulatively, but genuinely. That night, I didn't write in my journal. Instead, I reread William's entries about me, about his hopes and fears and desperate belief that character matters. And I made a decision. I would honor him. Not by becoming him, that was impossible and undesirable, but by building what he wished he'd built, a company that valued people, that measured success in dignity preserved, not just dollars earned, that proved profit and ethics weren't mutually exclusive. It would be hard, it would cost me, but William had given me everything, including the truth about how complicated love can be. The least I could do was try. 1 year later, November. The office overlooking Boston Harbor that had once terrified me now felt like home. I was 19 years old and CEO of a $3 billion empire, and somehow, impossibly, I was surviving. The lawsuits ended, finally. Catherine, Robert, and Thomas Montgomery settled out of court, accepting substantial payouts in exchange for relinquishing all claims to the company. They took their money and disappeared into lives of expensive mediocrity. I heard Catherine moved to Monaco. Robert bought a yacht. Thomas invested in cryptocurrency and lost half his settlement within 6 months. They got exactly what they wanted, cash without responsibility, and proved William right in the process. My father never did go to rehab. He drank himself to death 8 months after I inherited. Liver failure. Quick at the end. I paid for the funeral, didn't cry. Maybe that makes me heartless, but I'd grieved for him years ago when he chose bottles over his son. By the time he actually died, I'd already said goodbye. Sarah was still in my life, still treating me like a human being instead of a bank account. We weren't dating, I still couldn't trust romantic relationships not to be transactions, but she was real. Constant. She'd text me stupid memes when I took myself too seriously, force me to eat actual meals instead of working through dinner, remind me that I was still Jake from Mel's Diner no matter how many zeros sat in my accounts. You're doing that thing again, she said one evening, finding me in my office at 9 p.m. surrounded by reports. The thing where you forget you're 19 and act like you're 60. I have responsibilities. You have a messiah complex, she interrupted gently. You think you have to save everyone, fix everything William broke, prove you deserved this. You're going to burn out. She was right. I was exhausted, constantly. The weight of proving myself worthy, of honoring William's faith, of transforming a corporate empire into something ethical, it was crushing. But I couldn't stop. Stopping felt like failing. What would you do, I asked her, if someone gave you everything and asked you to be better than they were? I'd try, she said simply, but I wouldn't kill myself doing it. William chose you because of who you were, Jake, not who you might become. You're allowed to still be that person. Montgomery Industries was changing, slowly. I'd implemented new safety standards across all facilities, increased wages for lower-level employees, created programs for worker education and advancement. Profits dropped initially, shareholders complained, board members expressed concern, but employee retention increased, productivity rose. The company started earning a reputation as an ethical employer. Talent wanted to work for us. Marcus called it the long game, short-term costs for long-term sustainability. William had taught me to think in quarters. I was learning to think in decades. But the real change wasn't in policy, it was in culture. I spent time on factory floors, not just in boardrooms, learned employees' names, asked about their families, treated people like humans instead of resources. Revolutionary, apparently. Executives were baffled by my unorthodox approach. Workers were skeptical at first, assuming performance, waiting for the trap. But consistency matters. After months of genuine attention, the skepticism softened. "You're not like the old Mr. Montgomery," one factory supervisor told me during a plant visit. 60 years old, worked for the company for 35 years. He was brilliant but cold. "You actually give a damn. Doesn't seem like an act." "It's not," I said honestly. "I used to work for $8 an hour. I remember what it's like to be treated as disposable. I won't do that to other people." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Your dad teach you that?" "No," I said quietly. "He taught me the opposite. I had to learn it despite him." That night, I visited William's grave for the first time since the funeral. Simple headstone, no ostentation, just his name and dates. I'd avoided coming. Too much unresolved emotion, too much complication. But I needed to say things I'd never gotten to tell him. "I'm still angry at you," I said to the headstone, feeling ridiculous and necessary simultaneously. "For manipulating me, for testing me, for making me carry your redemption. It wasn't fair. I was 17. The cemetery was quiet, except for wind through trees. But I understand now. You were desperate, dying, trying to build meaning from mistakes. You bet everything on a kid you barely knew because your own children had become strangers. That's tragedy, William, real tragedy." I sat on the grass, not caring about the cold or damp. "I read your journals, all of them. You documented everything, every test, every observation, every moment you worried you'd chosen wrong. You knew what you were doing to me, the burden, the loneliness. You knew and you did it anyway, because you believed I could handle it." A crow landed on the headstone, looked at me with glassy eyes, then flew away. "Were you right? I don't know yet. Some days I think I'm succeeding, building something better, proving character matters. Other days I feel like I'm drowning, pretending to be someone capable when I'm just a kid playing dress-up in your life." I pulled out the leather journal he'd given me, now filled with a year of my own entries. "But I'm trying. That's what you wanted, right? Not perfection, just effort, just someone who'd care enough to try." I opened to a blank page and wrote the final entry. "Year 1 complete. I survived. I didn't destroy your company, or corrupt myself, or become what I feared. I made mistakes. God, so many mistakes. But I learned from them. I'm not you, William. I'm not trying to be. I'm building my own version of leadership, one that values people, that measures success in dignity, not just dollars. Is it naive? Maybe, but it's genuine. And I hope, that matters more. You gave me everything, and in doing so, taught me that everything isn't enough without purpose, without connection, without remembering where I came from. I miss you. I'm angry at you. I'm grateful to you. All of it, simultaneously. That's what love is, I guess. Complicated, messy, real. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for believing I could be more than my circumstances suggested. Thank you for your faith, even if it came wrapped in manipulation. I'll keep trying, keep building, keep proving that kindness isn't weakness, and character matters. That's what you wanted. That's what I'll give you. Rest well. Your legacy is in good hands. Not perfect hands, but genuine ones." I closed the journal and stood, brushing grass from my pants. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, beautiful and temporary, like everything that matters. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed. Sarah, stop brooding at the cemetery and come have pizza. You're still a teenager, remember. Act like one occasionally. I smiled, messaged back, on my way. 1 year ago, William Harrison died and left me billions. But what he really gave me was choice. The choice to become someone worthy of faith, to build something meaningful, to prove that the scared kid who stopped on a frozen December night had something more valuable than money. The capacity to stay human in a world designed to make you forget. I didn't know if I'd succeed, but I was trying. And maybe, probably, that was enough. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, thank you, really. This wasn't just a story about inheritance or money. It was about what we owe the people who believe in us, about whether goodness can survive power, about the complicated nature of love and manipulation. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me about someone who believed in you before you believed in yourself, or about a time you had to choose between comfort and character. And subscribe, because every week I'm sharing true stories about the moments that define us, about ordinary people facing impossible choices, about what it costs to stay human in a world that rewards cruelty. Some legacies are measured in dollars. The ones that matter are measured in the lives we touch and the choices we make when nobody's watching. Thank you for watching. See you next week. The weight of inheritance isn't in the billions. It's in the question that follows you forever. Am I worthy of someone's faith? And the only answer that matters is the one you build through choices, one difficult decision at a time.